Good morning, afternoon, what are we? Yes, it's already afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Isaac Zablocki. I'm Director of Film Programs here at the JCC in Manhattan and Director of the Other Israel Film Festival. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I hope you grabbed some coffee and are ready, stimulated for an exciting conversation event here with some of the guests of our festival. We have an exciting day. I'm just going to let you know what's going on today a little bit here at the JCC as far as Other Israel goes. At 2 p.m. after this panel is the fantastic film Almost Friends. It's about two girls, an Arab girl from Lod and a Orthodox Jewish girl who make a connection through an educational online system and develop a friendship. At 4 p.m. there's Fire Lines about Palestinian and Israeli firefighters who work together to put out the most treacherous fire in the Carmel in 2010. And then at 6 p.m. is the feature film Vila Tuma. And we have here also at 8 p.m. the film Zero Motivation. All of these will be followed by conversations, and we feel these conversations are the most important thing that we do here with the films, and we hope that today will also allow you to engage a little bit and take things beyond the films and take things a little further and get into some of these important topics, and to moderate today's panel. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of JCC Manhattan, Rabbi Joy Levitt.
So I just have to say I have the best job in the world, right? I mean, it's just an extraordinary honor to be sitting here with these extraordinary filmmakers, journalists, actors, people that are working so hard to bring such extraordinary stories to our community. You know this doesn't happen by accident, and I just need to call out Yitzi, Ravit, and Ariana, who you see in the front and the back. And of course, Carol, where are you? Carol Zabar, whose idea this was. Dirty little secret, the way that Carol and I plot a lot of this is that we work out together on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings in the JCC Fitness Center. With our Israeli trainer. Carol tries to get me to speak Hebrew. I resist, but Carol's Hebrew is so excellent. So you never know where good ideas are going to come from. That's a big plug for the JCC Fitness Center. So welcome to this important conversation this afternoon with the people that are really responsible for the Other Israel Film Festival, and that is all of you. We're going to ask you to do something extremely hard, maybe the hardest thing you've ever done in your career, which is to get beyond your biography and talk to us about your journey, about the hardest thing that you've had to face in that journey, and where you find hope. And you're going to do that in 5 minutes each. And I'm going to keep you to it so that we get an opportunity for our audience to ask you questions and probe some of the issues that you have explored with us. The empty chair is actually for Mira Awad, who will be joining us shortly. Actress and singer, There Must Be Another Way, has been criticized from both ends of the spectrum, so we'll speak with Mira last. To my immediate right, Menashe Noy, actor in Arab Labor, The Dove Flyer, Sweets. Feels to me like you're in every film that we have here, certainly over the years. Next to Menashe is Lucy Aharish, who is an Israeli news presenter. I'm not going to give you any of their bios so that they can do that for themselves. Next to Lucy, of course, is Dror Marais, who is a guest of the festival this year and moderated a panel, and most of you know, was the director of the Oscar-nominated Gatekeepers. And right next to Dror, the great David Broza, who was here last night with a wonderful film that I hope all of you had a chance to see, and a kind of surprise concert afterwards. So without further ado, Menashe, tell us a little bit about your journey. What's the hardest thing you ever had to do as a professional? And where do you find hope?
Okay.
And we begin.
5 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. 5 minutes, it's a short time to find hope. You know?
Nachon.
Yeah. I'm an Israeli actor involved in, especially in the film industry, also TV, dramas, and theater. And I think the hardest things in my career, because I start to work, let's say, in the beginning of the 90s, and that was the time, in the beginning it was the very hard time because there was not industry at all, and there was only one channel in Israel. And it was the hard time politically, and that was in after the first Intifada. And it was very similar. I find myself sometimes it's similar to our time. Why? Because we were very pessimistic, and I came here to New York, and we made the independent film here, and that was the hard things that I ever made.
Did you ever think of giving up? Did you ever think of becoming an accountant?
Sorry?
Did you ever think of giving up? Saying, I'm not going to be an actor, it's just too hard.
No, never. I never thought about that. When I didn't, in those times I didn't want to be an actor. I learned film studies, and it was very hard to make films. That was the hard time. But I work in both. But in 92, it's very interesting because in 92, I have to say, the special thing that I became famous and popular is because a TV series that called The Quintet, החמישייה הקאמרית. And in the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, we make 2 pilots in the university. When we were in the students, and it began in the university. And then there was no possibility to sell it to anyone or to make something with that. And after 2 years, everything changed because the election, the small party come to they were in the government. Rabin was the prime minister. The TV channels were Channel 2, and all the commercials began, the commercial industry began to work and things like that, and everything was open. And there, we found ourselves in Channel 2, they bought the Quintet, and
You were off.
there are the history, and all of the other is the history. So, let's say that sometimes there is a miracles, sometimes things change. And now when I speak with my students in the university, I tell them that maybe now we are in the same situation, that because of the internet and everything, things open. And this is a very critical times because the, let's say, the conservative way of thinking, they can't go ahead with the modern times. But there is a moment in the history that things open. And I find myself now, I think, in the same situation. The most difficult things is not to be so commercial, not to put your career into the commercial that gives you a lot of money and give you a lot of popular, and you have to keep
Fame
yourself.
and money are bad?
Sorry?
Fame and money are bad?
They're not bad, but they can be bad if you become a slave for it. And you forget your what is the main duty of your work. But it's okay. But it's, you must work in this field. So you have to keep yourself. And the hope that I got that even now that the situation in Israel is very, very dangerous and critical, and we are in very difficult times. And if you heard the news from Israel, we are now in a very specific moment. But my hope is that suddenly it can be changed. Yeah, suddenly I still believe about the human being.
Thank you. Well done. Okay, that's a lot of pressure on the rest of you, right? He did 5 minutes very well. Lucy.
It was 5 minutes?
Yeah, you did excellently.
5 minutes, to put my life in 5 minutes is just
So,
like...
Lucy, you have a very interesting journey, so we really want to hear it.
Yeah.
And you have interesting, important challenges that we need to hear, so please.
I will start with maybe the challenge that you put, and to say what is the hardest thing that I had to do in my professional life. I don't think that I faced it yet. I think that I'm doing a lot of things that are coming naturally because of who I am and what I am. And who I am, my name is Lucy Aharish. I'm Israeli Arab Muslim presenter in I-24 News and on the mainstream Channel 2. I have a news show on Channel 2, Israeli Channel 2, and I'm presenting the main show, Evening Edition, in I-24 News and managing the prime time in the Arabic channel and the English channel. I grew up and I was born and raised in Dimona, which is a really, really small town in the south of Israel that, according to foreign reports, has some kind of a nuclear fabric there. According to foreign reports.
Really?
Yeah, we're not allowed to, censorship, we're not allowed to say...
What's at Dimona, right.
Yeah, what's in Dimona.
Not there.
It's not
No.
there.
No.
It's some kind of a fabric or whatever. So I grew up there with two more sisters and my parents. My parents have been living there for the last 43 years. So it means that I grew up as the only kid in school who's Muslim, who's Arab, which brought a lot of, let's say, obstacles and an interesting life that now I think that I wouldn't be able to sit here in front of you if I wouldn't passed what I passed and if my parents didn't take the decision to actually raise us in a Jewish community and not in an Arab community. I think that I'm looking back in my life, I started my career as, not even my career, I went to the university in Jerusalem, and for the first time in my life, I met with Arabs. For the first time in my life, I met with Palestinians only when I was 19 years old. The only Arabs that I knew before were my family. I knew my uncles, but I didn't have any Arab friends. So the first time that I got to Jerusalem, and the first time because I was a really right-wing ideologist. I grew up in Dimona. I was, in one way or another, I was a Zionist. And because I went through a bombing when I was 5 years old in the Gaza Strip, and 2 Molotov bombs were thrown at my family's car. And I grew up with the feeling that I hate Palestinians. I don't love them. For me, really, the state of Israel can just throw up throw some, like a big bomb, and they can just get rid of all the Palestinian problem. So the first time that I encountered with Palestinians was when I was only 19 years old. And it's the first time that I heard the word Nakba, because at home we didn't speak about it. Because my parents thought...
Want to explain what Nakba means?
Yeah, they said Nakba is let's say, 1948 is the independent day for Israel, so it's the Nakba day for the Palestinians, where the tragedy for the Palestinians. And I didn't hear it because my parents didn't want to change what we grew up on. They didn't want to, let's say, break our dream or break the reality that we're living in. And they said that when they will grow up, they will understand. When they will grow up, they will be intelligent enough to understand and decide what is right and what is wrong. So I got to Jerusalem and I started working in a Glad Kosher hotel.
You know, if this was a feature film, you'd
receptionist.
accuse us of saying this is impossible, right?
Yeah.
She gives me idea to a new documentary.
And drawer is off.
And I think that the first time that I understood that there is something else bigger was when I went with one of my friends in the hotel. And it was the first, I think, the first 2 years, 3 years that they started building the fence between Israel and the Palestinian territories. And I didn't understand, and I didn't want to understand the Palestinians. So he told me, come, I want to take you to the fence, and I want you to understand. And at that week, I remember that I saw the Truman Show. And it felt like that. I felt that I'm getting there, and I just ran into a big wall. And I said, okay, this is more complicated than we can think, because on the other side there is someone and people who are living there that doesn't have any idea or won't have any idea about the people who are living on my side. And I think that that was my turning point towards the Palestinian, and that was my turning point by understanding that I need to go and do something else. More than being an actress, because I wanted to be an actress and not a journalist, but my father didn't allow me. He said, go and make money. And then he's a Jew, I swear to God, he's not Muslim. So
Here's an actor who doesn't want to make money. Here's a journalist who wishes that she could make money. This is fascinating.
But so I decided being a journalist. I also I acted in some films, and I managed to let's say have a blur between being an actress and being a journalist. I think that this summer really brought us to another point where it was very difficult to get into the studio, if it's the Israeli Channel 2 studio or if it's the I-24 News studio, to get in there and really have an objective point of view and try to pass the message and give the audience the objective perspective as much as we can, and as much the censorship is allowing us to. But I thought that this summer I had a lot of big responsibility by delivering the message, the real message of the people who are living in the Middle East, if it's the Palestinians or the Israelis. So.
And where do you see hope?
You know, after yesterday's panel, I should say that there is no hope for both sides, neither the Palestinians
Was this in
or
the Arab labor panel?
Yeah, the panel with Arab labor. But I refuse. There was something that Said Kashua said. He's not here, unfortunately, but he said that it's a problem when you want to make people laugh. It's a problem when it comes when you're a victim. I don't want to see myself as a victim. I'm not a victim. I'm not a victim of the Israeli government. I'm not a victim of Jews. I'm not a victim of the Israeli Arab community. I'm not a victim, because the moment that I will start looking at myself as a victim, this is the moment that I'm allowing the Israeli government, or I'm allowing extremists to look at me and treat me like a victim. So for me, I do see hope, and I do see that there is a certain point that we can reach to an understanding, although it seems dark, but it seemed dark like for the last 65 years. So I don't think, and we're managing, and we're sitting here, and we're still having Arab friends, and there is integration between Jews and Arabs in Israel. So I don't think that there is no hope. I think people create darkness, and I think that people create the no hope phrase that we don't have. But I really do think that if you look at it from another perspective, from sitting on the fence, you see that it's much less complicated than we think.
Thanks. You should know that we're going to take questions as soon as our panelists are finished, and we've got question cards going around the room. So if you want to have ask a question, we've got sheets and pens around. So please let Ravit or whoever is sending them out just let them know you'd like a question card. Dror, your brief but significant journey, and what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to do?
Well, it seems to me that all I'm doing is very hard, so I don't know what, it's not a contest who is the hardest, but I will go through some of the hardest moments in my life. I learned in the university with Menashe, so we are almost at the same time at the university in learning cinema and television. 4 of November 1995 definitely exceeds. It was my 34th birthday, and at that time I was a father to 2 very, very small kids. I thought that after a long, long time, there is a light at the end of a very dark tunnel in solving the conflicts. And at the end of that night, the Prime Minister of Israel was assassinated by an extreme, crazy right-wing, not so crazy, but and from my point of view, the people that were responsible, the real responsible people for the murder of Rabin are still at large, spreading their poison outside. They are doing it as we speak now. And I don't want to be too extreme now, but this was definitely one of the defining moments in my life. Everything seems to deteriorate since that moment. I was a director for the Sharon campaign in 2000 when he challenged Ehud Barak. And for me, I was a young soldier during the Lebanon War. I didn't fight, happily, but few of my friends died during the Lebanon War, so I had an open account with Ariel Sharon. It was, for me, very interesting to meet the guy personally. He was kind of a mythical character in the Israeli agenda, and for my astonishment, I found a very nice, food-loving, very likable person. He loved food a lot. And
it was obvious, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think when you characterize Sharon, I think that I spent a lot of time with him. And we came close in a way, as much as you can be close. But the only thing that he allowed himself to express his feelings was in food. That was the only way that he let go. In everything other, he was a very restrained person. And for the first time, I learned about the power of how do you manipulate the public opinion. How do you create, through commercials, a nice, likable grandfather who is a tribe elder, and the people eat that, and they believe in that. And Sharon was, he didn't like to speak a lot with teleprompters, all his faces used to move, his nose especially. And we found out that the dictated speeches that we used to give him he couldn't speak. It was always, and I said, let me speak to him, interview him in a documentary way. And I was very harsh. I didn't, saved words with him. How will you bring peace? You are the man that doesn't stop in red light. You always bring war. This is what you are doing. Now the second intifada, the people are wanting someone with a big stick. And he kind of liked the challenge. And he answered, for me, nothing of that was inside the commercials, but he answered very interestingly in a way. But I remember that he said that for peace, he's willing to give substantial concessions. And when we asked his advisor, what are the substantial concessions, they used to joke and say that it was probably he wouldn't eat the third falafel pita bread. This was his most concession, but he proved otherwise. I mean, and to see that change in that person who was the father of settlements and became from the father of settlements to the man who uprooted, basically killed his babies in Gaza and was willing to do that furthermore. And it comes to the second moment in the beginning of January 2006 where he got the stroke, where I think another huge blow to Israel, strategic blow, and definitely it was also in the middle of a campaign for the next elections. I think that the situation in Israel would have been completely different if he would have stayed in the same way or a tragic Shakespearean way as Rabin was taken away from us in that brutal way. Same way Sharon. I have an open bill with the doctors in the Hadassah hospitals as well. They know that. My mother worked there. The third moment was trying to persuade Avraham Shalom, the head of the Shin Bet, the old head of the Shin Bet, to speak about the 300 line, which is crucial in my movie. The Gatekeepers was one of the most crucial moments. He didn't want to speak about it. And I remember he said, I will come to the movie, but I will not speak about the 300 line. So I said, okay, we will start. And we started the interview. And the second interview, the first interview was only one syllable's answer, yes, no. I gave, long speeches, and he was used to answering yes and no. And the second interview was much more open. And before the third interview, I came to him and I said, listen, you have to speak about it. You cannot. This episode was so essential in the Israeli history, so you have to speak. He said, I will see. And at the third interview, I tried to understand where he is. At the end, I asked the question, and he started to speak, and I knew, when he started to speak, I knew that I was in, and he openly kind of said what happened that night. That was the most difficult interview I did in my life. I came home and slept for 24 hours after that. It wasn't easy to confront him, and believe me, I interviewed from Netanyahu, Sharon, Condoleezza Rice, a lot of people. He was one of the toughest one.
And hope? Tor, where do you find hope? Is there hope in that moment? If you could get him to speak, anything's possible. Where do you see hope?
Look, I would say I would describe myself as a realist, pragmatist and realist. I never called myself a leftist or a right. I'm a pragmatist. I don't see a lot of hope. I have to say the truth. I think that hope can come from leaders, and the absence of that in Israel, especially now, I think Netanyahu is the worst horrible prime minister ever to sit on that chair, and it seems that he will be with us for a long time. I think that what I see in Israel now is frightening, especially the slope that we've been witnessing since the last Gaza war and what is going on now in Israel. It doesn't give me a lot of hope. But I will finish with a small story, which maybe can say there is hope, although I don't believe that enough. I was driving my daughter to the army. She's now in the army. Both my kids are in the army now, as we speak. Yesterday I spoke with Mika and I told her, don't wear uniforms. I will pay the money to the taxi, go until the base, and just don't, because I'm afraid that, concentration of soldiers are a kind of aim to terrorists or to suicide attacks or whatever. So I will pay the taxi, go special from Tel Aviv to your base, which is in the south of Israel. But I took her one day when Obama was in Israel into her base. And on the phone in the car was Ami Ayalon, the head of the Shin Bet, and he says, Dror, I'm very angry at you. And I said, why, Ami? And he said, in your movie, there was a sentence that I said, and you cut it in the middle. And Obama exactly said the same sentence that I gave you now. And I said, what is that? And there is a story in the movie which was very significant to me, where Ami Ayalon said that he grew up in a kibbutz, and he knew that in Jerusalem there is a house, and in the house there's a second floor, and there's a long corridor in that second floor, and in the end of the corridor there's a door, and behind the door there's an old man who thinks for us. His name is Ben Gurion, and after he grew up, after the 1973 war, he went into that house and he walked into that corridor, And he walked that corridor and he saw that there is no door, and behind that missing door, there is no one who is thinking for us. And in my movie, I cut it there. And from there, we came to the desperation, which I felt. And Ami continued and said, the fact that there is no one behind that missing door puts a huge responsibility on our shoulders. And that responsibility is because we know the incompetence of the leaders, because we know how unprofessional and how short-sighted they are, we have the double the obligation to do much more as citizens. And basically, this is what Obama expressed in his speech in Jerusalem, where he said, it's up to the citizen to rise and to push their leaders to do something. I don't see a huge movement of citizens in Israel doing that now. So the only hope that I can give or say is from those two people beside me. I met her here for the first time, so she's very nice and it's hopeful to see. And David Broza, who's his film Everybody Should See, who kind of embodied in his work the endless and relentless trying to bridge the gap and trying to bridge the barriers between the two people and create a better reality. It should come from the people. It shouldn't come from the politician. If we will continue to trust the politician, nothing will come out of that.
There is an emerging theme here about leadership, which maybe we'll get a chance to talk about, but David, Israel, Spain, America, Israel, Europe, China, where are you?
No, China. I have not been to China.
But you're going to Beijing.
Hopefully.
Right. So
I used to boast
tell us
about...
your journey.
Well, no, I say I never been east of Jerusalem, west of LA, and south of San Antonio. But that has changed since I said that, yeah.
Right.
My life, in 5 minutes, it's hard. But again, I was born in Haifa. My mother was born in Tel Aviv. My grandmother's from Rehovot. So this is our lineage. I was very young when my parents moved to Spain. And I suddenly realized that Israel is not the whole world, and there's something beyond the waters of the Mediterranean. And I adjusted slowly, but as a child, I guess that was quick. But I felt the adjustment of being this Israeli street kid from Tel Aviv in Madrid, learning to cope with Spanish way of life, Spanish thinking, where there's no Jews at all. And if ever I remember as a child mentioning to a taxi driver, I would say, if I would take a taxi or on a bus, would ask me, where are you from? Because they noticed I'm a stranger. I would say Israel. And they kind of almost would be trying to smell, what is that? Like, they really don't know how to take what is, in those days, I'm talking about 1967, 68, 69. And I knew that I had to assimilate very quickly and stop, getting these other people into a corner. I guess this is the first time that I learned from my own experience on how important it is to build the trust with someone before you break in and give him your point of view and your thoughts. Just build an interaction. It's a taxi driver, it's a bus driver, it's an ambassador, it's a lawyer, I don't care who it is. You always have to build our sixth sense, our deepest sense, almost an animal sense in human beings is the most vulnerable one, and it's the first one to open or close in front of a stranger. And this has helped me a lot in my line of work. Not really work, it's my life, the way I live. Being a musician, obviously it's not an acquired profession. I didn't go to university, I didn't go to school, I was right out of the army, I needed a job. Israeli poet Yonatan Geffen needed a sideman on his shows where he was reciting poetry and giving his point of views about life, and I would be the sweet side guy who sings love songs. I got that job at first for 10 months while I'm figuring out if I'm going to university. Wrote my first song in the first month that I was with Yonatan Geffen. It's Yeh Tov, which has become like a peace anthem, and from there on, I've had 35 albums out and endless number of songs that have become like somewhat hits.
So what's the hardest thing that's happened to
Now,
you
this is
professionally?
I've had many, obviously, like anybody. But I would like to connect that to my latest project, East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem. So as I was working on bringing the Israeli musicians to the studio, and these are my own personal musicians I've been working with for years. I've known their children, I've seen their children born, we've been through so many things over the years, and yet when I would ask them to come to East Jerusalem to work with me, the conversation immediately went off to soccer, to politics, to other things, just avoid talking to Broza about coming and committing to these 8 days. They were just afraid, psychologically afraid. That was a difficult task, but further than that, a month, and I'm working 2 or 3 years on this project, I already have a date, January 2013, January 20th. Turns out to be 2 days before the next elections, which just sprung up on us by surprise. I have to confront my Palestinian partners, Palestinian friends with whom I've been working for many years, very prominent, very opinionated, respected. And actually this confrontation comes from my partner, Saeed. I call him partner, but he's really my friend, as close a friend as can be. And he says, we have to talk. And he invites me to Bet Hanina, to his home, along with his other good friend, Issa Frej, who became the director of photography in this project. And as I have my way, I let things flow. He cooks dinner. We have dinner. We have some wine. We have some whiskey. Then we watch television from Lebanon. I don't understand a word. It's all in Arabic. I don't know what's going on. Before I know it, we're all asleep on the couch and on the floor. And I wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking they're asleep. Saeed is here, Issa on the other side, and thinking he wanted to talk to me about something. So I wake him up. I wake both up. I say, guys, we have to talk because tomorrow morning I'm out of here back to Tel Aviv and I don't know where I'm going to be. So we start again with coffee and whiskey and we look at each other. And Saeed, with his very, very withdrawn look and tired look and slow look, he just says to me, look, I'm not going to be able to be part of this project. I can't come to the studio. That's his studio. And my stomach turned inside out. It wasn't about what I'm trying to achieve. It's not about the story I want to tell. It's about the life that I've chosen to live and the path that I've chosen to take. And it's as if somebody's cutting the lifeline out of me. And I looked at Issa, and Issa looks at him and says, Saeed, you know, we invited David into our lives, and we started this over 25 years ago. And he says to him, you know, Saeed, we started a revolution. It's now. And I'm thinking, what are you guys talking about?
There was no camera there?
The best part is the story. The best part is the story to be told. And Saeed looks at Issa as if saying, we started the revolution, but I can't be part of it. Kind of saying it. And Issa says, but what about our children? What about everything we've done? And the revolution he means is about the state of mind, reconditioning the mind, not about going to the streets and protesting and throwing Molotov bottles and stones. It's that revolution that we're talking about. And I looked and I said, well, I know I have one partner. Then I said to Saeed, am I okay to use the studio? And he said, yeah, but I'm not going to be there. I said, okay. Now I'm you're talking about hope. And this is my process. So I was hit by a stick, but I was given a little string, and I held onto that string. That permission to go to the studio made me feel that no matter what happens, and this is what I told another gentleman, Steve Greenberg, who is also in the film. I said, you know, Steve, no matter what happens, worst comes to worst, it's me and Steve Earle in the studio with a Palestinian chef and an Israeli chef cooking for us. How bad can that be? For 8 days and 8 nights. And sure enough, on the second day, everybody came.
Food theme going on here, okay?
That was it. That's my
So that was your hope is you just had enough to go on.
Well, for 8 days and 8 nights.
And where are you?
A miracle.
And you and Saeed at this point?
Well, Saeed came for the first dinner for 5 minutes and left. We were 40 people in the studio and 60 invitees. Some of them are political activists. One of my best friends, Ron Pundak, who's one of the Oslo Accord dreamers and schemers, who was there. That was one of the last times that we were together. Many other people, friends. We ate. The second night, Saeed came, and there was so much wine and whiskey that around midnight, I asked him if he would like to hear what we were recording, and he listened and feverishly broke into the studio, took a darbuka, took a flute, and just played for about 15 or 20 minutes as if it's the end of time, and stormed out of the studio. We recorded and filmed everything. I couldn't get him to sign off a release. He's not on the film, but he is in the recording. And it was and Steve Earle, this is the most beautiful thing. Steve Earle clutched my arm, almost broke it. I guess he felt the tension, and he understood for the first time that the Israeli-Palestinian thing, it's not about borders, really. It's about these people. How can they break that wall that is between them psychologically? And he felt we broke the wall. He thought he brought the peace into the region. He almost broke my arm, saying, it's happening, brosa. It's happening. He said, yeah, it's going to be over in a second. He'll be gone. We'll be back to the same old story. And so it went on.
Yeah. I also want to give you guys a chance to ask each other questions, because I bet this foursome has never existed before. So if you have something on your minds that you're dying to know from each other, please, by all means, do that. I am curious about this leadership question, because in many ways, many of you have touched on it. So if you could be king and make it happen, right? Some of you were wondering whether actually it's about leadership or it's about grassroots. I kind of heard that, and I'm curious about that. Is there somebody on the scene in the Arab world, in the Jewish world, that you can imagine being the leader that can wake up the perhaps silent majority? Anybody got an idea? By the way, Israel's not the only country that's challenged by leadership, right? This is, I think, actually quite an issue around the world.
Somebody said Barack Obama.
It's
Barack
unbelievable.
Obama should be Israel's prime minister?
No, I'm
No,
saying
they're
that
people-
I'm saying about lack of leadership. It
yeah.
seems that people are more up to talking a lot and knowing the words and how to say it and to read from a prompter, but not actually stand and do what they're talking about. It's very nice. It was very nice to hear, and we were all hopeful when we heard Barack Obama standing in Cairo and standing in Israel and standing in the United States and talking about peace in the Middle East. But unfortunately, I won't start talking about the foreign policy of Barack Obama, because it won't be good. I think it will be the last time that I will get into the United States. But,
No,
but,
you're always going to be welcome here, Lucy, no matter what you say.
But I think that, yes, the lack of leadership is something that that we so feel in Israel. It's not that we're seeing right now something, an alternative in Israel. We just spoke about it yesterday. Who can stand in front of Benjamin Netanyahu right now and actually you say, okay, that he can lead this country? Unfortunately, it seems that he is gaining each and every time from this lack of option that we don't have on the other side, because, or on any side, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to look at the situation right now in Israel, and it seems that people are actually managing the country on Facebook. They're talking with people on Facebook. They are putting their posts. They're more occupied with the fact that they need to write another status on Facebook and to see how many likes they have. And I'm talking about the politicians. And I will give you an example. In one of the days, I had like this encounter with the extreme Jewish activist on one of my shows on Channel 2, and it was not, let's say, a comfortable thing that happened on air when he sent me to 22 other countries, and he told me that my place is not in Israel, and I'm not supposed to, this is not my land, this is not my country. And at the end of the discussion, I told him that I'm not going anywhere, so he told me, we will live and see. So at that point, I got a phone call from one of the ministers, right-wing minister. And he asked me something that I was so amazed that he asked me that. During this time, there were a lot of riots in Jerusalem, and I'm talking about a minister, not an MK, not a Knesset member. I'm talking about a minister who was sitting in the cabinet. And it was just like the beginning of Operation Protective Edge. And he's asking me, Lucy, tell me, these Arabs who are throwing stones on buses in Wadi Ara and al-Fakhm, are they the majority of the Arabs who are living in Israel? And I was just amazed that a minister in Israel is actually asking me if these youngsters are the majority of the Israeli Arabs who are living in Israel. If this is the way that Israeli Arabs in Israel are
Like
thinking.
he didn't know.
Like he didn't know.
Right.
He didn't know. He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand Arabic, of course. He never sat down actually and spoke with an Israeli Arab or Palestinians who's living in Israel and actually had a conversation with them or tried to understand that. He didn't. He was so filled with cliches and so filled with stereotypes and so filled with every single thing that his beliefs that he wasn't able to even look at the other side. He wasn't able to sit down and ask himself, wait, I have 20% minority in this country that I don't know one thing about. I don't know anything about this minority who's living in, not to say, what do I know about the Palestinians?
Yeah.
So it is a problem of leadership. And when you see the ministers and when you see the prime ministers, when the prime minister is not talking about Israelis, he's talking about the people of Israel. When Benjamin Netanyahu is talking about the people of Israel or Am Israel, he's not talking about the Israelis. And there is 20% in each and every time that they hear the prime minister, they understand that no one is talking to them. We lived under Operation Protective Edge also. We lived under the rockets also. My parents are living in the South. No one is actually, I didn't see the prime minister getting up and talking about the citizens of Israel. He talked about Am Israel, and Am Israel is not the Israeli Arabs. And to know that you are living in a country that constantly ignores, and I'm talking about the government again. I'm not talking about people who I'm living with and my friends and the people that I'm working with.
So let's actually move a little bit to that, because a number of the questions that I'm getting have to do with the way in which you use art and media. How does, forget the government for a moment and go to the level of where you all are. I mean, David has shown us an example in this movie. If you haven't seen it, please find a way to see it. I'm not sure you can see it in Tel Aviv, nachon?
In Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem in December. And hopefully there'll be other opportunities. So in your other experience, Menashe, Dror, how have the arts been able to stimulate this discussion? If we can't find it, our hope in the leadership, can we find it in your world?
No, I want to say something before, because after I heard David and Lucy, I want to talk about this Am Israel. This is my people. I belong to Am Israel. And the people, the Jewish in Israel, and maybe all over the world, I think maybe because I was born in Israel, it's for me natural to live there. I'm native, let's say. And I think that we lie to ourselves that we don't say, look, Israel is a big history success. Israel, in 100 years, became a very strong country. And after the Holocaust, it's a very strong country. But what happened to us is that we are strong, very strong, military, and let's say economic. But we forgot why we are here, why we are there, why we're in the Middle East, why we come here, and what is our purpose, what is our mission, and what we are going to do with that. And yesterday in our conversation, We talk about, okay, one of the professors said, we want to be a Jewish country. Netanyahu, all the time, let's say we are a Jewish country. Let all the Arabs agree that we are a Jewish country. What is that? What kind of a Jews? What is to be a Jew? What is to be a Jew nowadays? Not the Jews of the first temple, not the Jews of the second temple, not the Jews of the diaspora. What is now to be a Jew or a Jew country? And how you're going to keep it? So what happened in the last years is that the Israelis, the Jewish Israelis, are get up in the morning to every day to make the other suffer. To make the other suffer, and maybe they will go away. So, and we put a lot of energy on that. And we forgot education, and we forgot health, and we forgot everything. So the situation is very critical. And you know, I try to be not naive. When I agree withdraw, the settlements are the, let's say, the big problem. And everybody is blame on that. It's not the right side or the left side. Rabin and Peres put them there. So we continue to play with ourselves, you know, we argue with ourselves, and we talk, Am Yisrael talk with himself, and we don't pay attention what's happened outside, who is our partners, what we are going to do.
And do you see art as an
My
avenue?
art?
Your
art?
art?
I get to this point. Because when we said in the 92, when Rabin said, okay, let's say, no, it starts with Begin and Sadat, and then Rabin and Arafat. We're talking about, let's solve the problem. We knew, okay, there is the conflict, and let's try to solve it. But the main issue, we don't, let's not talk about it. We talk about, and then you say, okay, the problem, the conflict is territorial conflict. Okay. The conflict, and then we said, no, the conflict is political conflict. No, the conflict is national conflict. I believe nowadays, we got to the point that we knew that we will get to this point. It means it's, let's face it, it's a religious conflict. And we are Jews and Muslims, especially Muslims, but Arabs, Muslims, and we talk about Har HaBayit, and we talk about the other thing, because, and maybe we say, okay, this is the extreme, this is the radicals, but the radicals now are controlling the Middle East. So I found myself, even myself and maybe the others, that in my side, the Jews call me sometimes, I would say, Boged?
Traitor.
Yeah, and maybe Lucy, the Arabs call her traitor.
Oh, definitely.
So the conflict is very hot. And I got, in my point of view, to my work. In the quintet, I feel that the ideological, or maybe we thought, it was all the time to dig under our ideological, Zionist ideology. After we dig the cliches, the whole way of thinking that the time we must forget it and go on. From that time on, I work with Ilyas Suleiman, and we try to make, Ilyas Suleiman, one of the Palestinians director, or with Said Kashua, try to make project together. And not to forget that, okay, this is Arab Muslims or Arab Palestinians, and I'm a Jew, Israeli, but let's say that we can live together in the same land. And most of it now, this is what makes me optimistic, that by the time, and especially after Rabin murdered, the, let's say, non-religious people in Israel started something that happened before, to ask them spiritual questions, religious questions, who we are, why we are here, there in Israel.
It was
Our
finished
land,
after 5
homeland.
minutes.
And it's very interesting because you saw that because we are very strong and we were empty with spiritual questions,
Yeah.
empty with connection to God, to Elohim, to this text in the Bible. And I believe that now we deal with this question to come to the Muslims and talk with them about the main part. And I know that there are people that talk even about, I mean, imams and rabbis that talk about the Har HaBayit. Are we going to blow the Middle East because of the temple, of the symbol? I mean, is that the symbol is most important than the belief? So I believe that, I think that in my work, I try all the time to deal with this time, with the new Jewish revelation.
So, Dror, I'm not going to ask you to answer the question, are we going to blow up the Temple Mount in order to, right? But in your own work, and particularly in The Gatekeepers, which was, I think, a very disruptive film, very surprising film for at least American audiences. What was the reaction? How did that push this conversation forward? Did you see change as a result of that work and the work that you're doing now?
Look, as a Jew, Golda Meir said that she's a prime minister to 3 million prime ministers, so I cannot now not say something about what was said before that. I will do it briefly. I think the main problem of Israel is that Israel is a country without borders, literally. In all aspects of life, there is no borders. There is no political, physical borders. There is no borders between the religious and the non-religious. There is no borders in every aspect of our lives.
No borders in our mind.
Yeah, and that's what serves the politician the best, because they can use that and always push ahead what they want. In the question of leadership, Barbara Tuchman wrote The March of Folly, where she said that the human race have moved amazingly in the last 4,000 or 5,000 years. We conquered space, we did amazing things in music, science, technology, whatever, but in the art of leadership, we have less good than what it was 3,000 years ago, and I say that it says something very philosophical about the human nature, and we see that vividly in Israel. Look, The Gatekeepers, my intention from the beginning was, I would say, anarchistic, because I came to the center of the defense establishment in Israel. The people that are maintaining the conflict, or their job is to be in the middle of the conflict and to do the dirty job of us Israelis, sending them to fight the war on terror, all the living heads of the Israeli Shin Bet, speaking for the first time. And I felt very comfortable with that when the film went out, because it's not Dror Borer who's saying those words, it's 6 heads, all the living heads of the Israeli Shin Bet are saying enough of the occupation. It is ruining our country, it is ruining our society, it is the worst thing that happened to Israel, and if we will continue that, the outcomes will not be good, to put it mildly. And astonishingly, what I did in conscience is that I came first to America. So the film had the tour of Telluride Film Festival, Toronto Film Festival, New York Film Festival, and it came to Israel as an Oscar-nominated film. When it went out, it was an Oscar-nominated film, so nobody could ignore that. And I was deliberately, during my New York Film Festival, they announced that there's going to be the elections in Israel. And I said that I have to release the movie before the elections, because it can change, maybe it can change something in the elections. And it comes to your question about art. I think that art, in a way, can change. And I feel that documentaries especially can change, because documentaries is now the only tool that people in the world can get a deeper sense of the world that they are living in. And especially when you come to those decision makers, the most important place in the world is the White House, when those decision makers are contemplating about what to do. The effect of that, of those decisions in every Oval Office, let's put it like that, or Prime Minister office, is felt in every household around the world. And one of my astonishment during doing that movie is to understand how fallible, how weak, and how cannot be trusted those leaders are, and how we have to put 7 eyes on each decision that they make, because at the end of the day, at the end of the rope of that decision, sometimes 100 million and more than that people are getting killed, nations are being invaded because of a stupid decision that was made by a human being who is like you and me, who does the same thing, who is not so much intelligent than you are, and you in America, you have very good examples of that. And we have the same example as in Israel as well. And Bibi Netanyahu is definitely a big example of how someone who I wouldn't let him run a grocery store becomes a prime minister. And everybody speaks that he is, intelligent. Now, look, it's a very serious matter. Everybody speaks how intelligent he is, how intellectual he is. In his emotional intelligence, he is nothing. He doesn't understand anything where he is. He thinks, and his psychology is horrible. And that's what leads this area where we live into a conflict after conflict after conflict. And as Yuval Diskin said, in the end of every staircase, there is a whole staircase that is waiting to go down more. And look, documentaries, and news, as much as I respect news, with all due respect,
It's okay.
is shallow, is looking for sound bites. Sometimes there is scarcely really serious journalists in the world today who really do a research work, a thorough research work, in order to bring the right decision or the right consequences of what is happening on the ground. Documentaries, when they are serious, big articles, the New Yorker or the New York, when someone goes and does a very thorough research, can give you a much more comprehensive understanding of the world that we are living in. And this is the only source of information, right information, that you can get and at least define your point of view around the world from that. And that was my definitely inclination in creating the gatekeepers. Put a mirror in front of the Israeli public and in front of the Jewish community in the world and see this is how our faces look, not coming from Amos Oz or David Grossman, the leftniks, who are very, very, or David Broza, from the people that are ordering
It's not bad company to be in, right? Amos Oz and David Grossman.
But coming from the people who order targeted assassination, who orders the torturing of people in order to get... these are the people that are speaking in the movie, and they are saying enough. But does anybody listen? Menashe told me something very nice when we came here, that Ari Fulman, the director of Waltz with Bashir, said if after the movie of Dror More nothing changed in the Israeli society, nothing will change.
Yeah. David, as the person perhaps who does the most time on airplanes on this group, maybe not, but I suspect maybe so. There's a question here about the international community's ability to affect change in Israel and Israeli leaders. Is this gonna come, is hope gonna be found, as I think a lot of you have said, in the direct contact between Israelis and Palestinians, Israeli Jews and Palestinians? Is there a role for the international community, whether it's the people sitting here or our leadership, Europe here, or is this really a Middle Eastern, or is there any such thing anymore as anything but a global response to this?
My immediate reaction is this is a Middle Eastern issue. And I think the international effect...
I think Dror doesn't agree, but I'm going to let you have your moment.
Let me just bring it all around.
I'm just looking at his body language.
It is definitely, at the end of the day, it is the people living in the Middle East are going to have to going to be
Try the song.
carrying out whatever it is and have to come to terms with whatever it is. As far as international effect, it's a mystery. Because you can say, okay, so what? Are we talking about the boycott? So if Israel gets boycotted, because if Israel is the culprit, the only one that has to be affected, how are you going to affect Palestinian side who are already affected? How much more siege can Gaza take? How many more hardships can the Palestinian Authority take? So Israel is the flourishing, strong economy. So Israel has to be attacked. This is what you're trying to say. Does the international world? It's a mystery to me. I would love to see, it's like a dad says, if you do this one more time, I'm going to spank you so hard, lock you in your room for 3 days, maybe give you water, and after that, let's see how you behave in school. Okay, then that happens one day, and then sometimes it works, sometimes as it happened with me, I ran away from home, This is what you do. And eventually I come back asking, would you please have me back home when I'm 16 or 17? And then I had to clean up my act, and it's the stick and the carrot. It's a very mysterious issue, and nobody can tell me this will work or not. I think we're all trying to figure out how is the world functioning today. And then you say, does Facebook do it? No, Facebook doesn't do it. And leadership? Yes, but where does the leader come from? I think it comes from a vacuum. I think Gandhi, when he came and became a Gandhi, and Mandela, okay, Mandela was hibernating for 27 years in jail. But let's say that other leaderships, even Obama, it came from nowhere. I'm not talking about how great he's been as a leader for 8 years that he's going to have. Let's say that one moment of a spark where I was in Madrid and I watched the election and the streets in Madrid were rushing out in such a miraculous gush of energy that suddenly there's a leader in the world. It only lasted for whatever it lasted, because then he has to get work in and show his leadership. So I don't know where the mystery is, whether that will bring, with pressure, international pressure, bring the solution. My concern is, can I maintain my relationship with the Shuafat kids and with the people behind those bars, behind those walls? Can I maintain my relationship with the settlers in Elkanah and in Okdim and in Betel? Can I maintain that, doing what I'm doing? Because if that door closes, I am the only one they met. As far as I know, very few artists or philosophers or thinkers even get close to opening up that little doorway where you can exchange views and maybe bring a change. But why does it have to happen in 60 or 70 years? Why does it have to happen in 100 years? Why can't you take Ireland? Why can't you take Switzerland that had 700 years of war? Imagine, we're only human,
Yeah.
Humanity goes on and on and on.
So I thought the hardest thing that I was going to have to do today was sit in the space of these extraordinary people, a musician, a filmmaker, a journalist, an actor, and stay out of their way. But actually what I'm finding is that the hope here is really in you. Each one of you, although you live in different places and come from different, you didn't talk about Iraq and Dimona are really not very similar, right? But what is so striking about the four of you is your openness, your sense of the possibility, your willingness to push yourself beyond the limits of your own sense of what you might do, despite the risks. And you didn't hear them all. I know there was a question about them. They are considerable for each one of these people, not just professionally, but personally. And yet you keep doing it. And I would say the hope of people who are willing to come to this festival, to open your minds, to consider positions, perspectives that maybe in your wildest imagination you couldn't have dreamt possible. I find that hope as well. Please stay with us for the rest of the festival. We're going to have a concluding announcement from Yitzi, yeah?
I first of all want to thank you all and thank Joy. Thank you. I want to thank Joy for handling a terrific panel and keeping everyone to their time, more or less. I want to thank most of all of you. We couldn't get to all of your questions, of course, but there were some fabulous questions here, and these are things that we want to continue engaging with throughout the week within our films and within our conversations. So please be there to ask and to be a part of these conversations, and we look forward to seeing you at other events. Again, at 2 o'clock, don't miss Almost Friends, 4 p.m. Fire Lines, and 6 p.m. Vila Tuma. grab a brochure, and we look forward to seeing you the rest of the week. Thank you all.